Welcome back to the VEROSCOPE report, where we're doing part 2 of the J. Bruce Ismay VEROSCOPE analysis. Now, if you remember the film, and we'll quickly go and watch part of the film so we can get the image in our mind of the CEO on board the Titanic getting into the lifeboat before the women and children. That was the accusation of the day. That was the media storm, and he had to face the sworn testimony 4 days after the sinking before the United States Senate. So in part 1, we did the analysis of part of his language. So let's just get through that. So we covered the preliminaries and how old he is. He's 50, he's the ship owner, he's the managing director. And this was the interesting part, because he says that he's a voluntary passenger, yes. So he repeated the question and then answered. So this is sensitive to him, being a voluntary passenger. And then what's of interest to us is the order of what's of interest to him. And he tells us that it's the revolutions, it's the distance, it's the speed, how many miles a day the ship was going, and how quickly she could go. And it was important to let us know that she wasn't at full speed. And we then got up to the collision and the one command, and that's where we got to. So let's quickly look at part of that film, and then we'll go back to the analysis itself.
Women and children up top. All right, women and children up top. Women and children.
Sun changed into evening wear.
Quartermaster.
Stand back, sir. That's the last one, sir.
No reply to your signals?
No, sir. I think the bastards must be asleep.
Report to Mr. Murdoch. Short-handed.
Aye, sir.
God help you.
It's only for a short while. Your men will be all right.
Sir, it's Captain Tone report to you, sir.
We'll take charge of this boat.
Aye, sir.
You'll want to watch yourself or it'll swamp.
Aye, sir.
Stand aside.
So he is shown helping women and children into the lifeboat in a fairly boisterous, panicking scene.
Madam, please, if I don't get through, will you send this to my sister? The address is on it.
Come along, please.
Don't forget.
Just a minute, sir. A bit pessimistic, aren't you?
Sea's freezing. Man won't last long in that. We've drawn a bad hand this time.
I've never been a good loser. I intend to get into a boat.
And I wish you luck.
Ready there?
No. Is there no one else?
Lower away. Stow it away.
Well, Phillips?
Nothing fresh, sir. Carpath is coming as fast as she can. The Olympic wanted to know if we were steaming south to meet her, and the Frankfurt keeps asking for more details. The idiots. They don't seem to understand, sir.
It can't be easy, though.
Okay, so let's go back now to the analysis itself. There we are. And here is the captain, Captain Smith, the famous photograph. Captain Smith of the White Star Line. So where were we? It's now 4 days later, and he's the CEO of the White Star Line, the man that you just saw get into the lifeboat. And he's being questioned by the United States Senate committee, I believe. And they say, or the person says, will you describe what you did after the impact or collision? And then Ismay, I presume the impact awakened me. I lay in bed for a moment or two afterwards, not realizing, probably, what had happened. Eventually, I got up and walked along the passageway and met one of the stewards and said, what has happened? And he said, I do not know, sir. I then went back into my room, put my coat on, and went up on the bridge, where I found Captain Smith. I asked him what had happened, and he said, we have struck ice. I said, do you think the ship is seriously damaged? He said, I am afraid she is. I then went down below. I think it was where I met Mr. Bell, the chief engineer, who was in the main companionway. I asked if he thought the ship was seriously damaged, and he said he thought she was, but was quite satisfied the pumps would keep her afloat. I think I went back onto the bridge. I heard the order given to get the boats out. I walked along the starboard side of the ship where I met one of the officers. I told him to get the boats out. I heard the order given to get the boats out. I walked along the starboard side of the ship where I met one of the officers. I told him to get the boats out. Okay, so we have multiple people giving orders. Let's start. Start with the first, so now we're doing the analysis of what we've just heard. Start with the first three words, stranger than they look. So he says, I presume the impact awakened me. The head of the line asked the plainest question about the most famous collision in history, cannot tell you it woke him. I presume the impact awakened me, he said. He presumes it. There is no jar, no sound, no felt moment of the strike anywhere in his account. The innocent reading is real. He was asleep in a suite, high and far aft, and a glancing blow forward would reach him through the steel of the hull only as a tremor. But it stands. His memory of the disaster begins not with the disaster, but a moment after it, with himself in bed. So remember, when we're doing the analysis, part of what we're doing is we're separating truthful, real, lived memory from construction language, where they're building a narrative to suit their own purpose. And by the end of the analysis, by the end of the VEROSCOPE analysis, you essentially being the analyst with me, and you also being the jury, and in this case the judge at the end, but wearing three different hats. And because it's you and you're in charge of it all, you can be as fair as you like when wearing each hat, and obviously you'll be fair. And that's the point. So if you haven't seen part one, we enter the statement believing the person until there is evidence from their own narrative, from their own words, from their own pen, their own authorship, uncontaminated. Unless we see evidence from themselves, then we believe them. So that's the attitude. Now there is, of course, a tension, because the purpose of having the attitude of we believe them as the primary attitude is to prevent searching for evidence which isn't there. But at the same time, we have to look for evidence. So there's a tension, a deliberate tension, between the two in the methodology. So we believe the speaker, and yet we're looking for evidence that might talk us out of that position. Do you see the tension? But the tension exists so that neither a conviction machine you become, nor the other way, purposely finding innocence everywhere. So then the time, he says, and time is very important to us as analysts. A moment or two, he says, and also eventually 2 different lengths for the same short gap between waking and acting. And the small true detail, put my coat on. You see, these little details, which do change over time, by the way, in innocent stories. Not so much that the act of putting the coat on changes, but little extra details like switching off the lamp, or noticing that there was a half-empty eaten tray outside number 42B on the floor that the waiter hadn't picked up yet. These tiny details of lived memory, they appear in truthful statements in a language pattern that is richer in detail than those who are just making up a narrative, because the person making up the narrative has to construct all of this rich detail, and for the sake of economy and the ability to actually do it and remember what the lie is, it doesn't contain this richness of detail, and nor does it tend to change over time. It tends to remain very static, which isn't how true memory works. But we're going into the weeds there, so let's stick to the task at hand. Now, above all, the posture. He asks the steward, the captain, Bell, each one a man he goes to for word. The posture, the internal, unconscious posture of a passenger seeking it from the men who hold it. He's going to each of the official officers and stewards, ship's crew, but he's going as the passenger in his posture. And this might be important because, and I think it's important to him too, because in order of the priority of his language used earlier on in the statement, he was very keen to tell us a passenger, yes. And he holds Bell completely, the chief engineer, in the main companionway, name and title. Full social introduction can also give us intelligence in the statement, and the exact spot that he stood and location is also important, and sometimes body position is also important. That is how clearly a man he has actually seen sits in his memory. So we are seeing, and we'll look at it scientifically, because we can now measure mathematically the difference between language coming from memory recall, lived events, versus the constructed language. So here we have memory recall. Truth, in other words. Most likely. He is then questioned, "What officer?" "That I could not remember, sir. I assisted as best I could getting the boats out and putting the women and children into the boats." And that is apparently what the evidence shows from other witnesses. As we saw in the film, although he was cast as the shameful man getting into the boat, they were gracious enough to also cast an element of the other way of looking at it, without the lens being altered, where he was acting in a helpful capacity. So we have to balance both. Then I stood upon that deck practically until I left the ship in the starboard collapsible boat, which is the last boat to leave the ship, so far as I know. Isn't that interesting? So it's the last lifeboat. I stood upon that deck practically until I left the ship in the starboard collapsible boat, which is the last boat to leave the ship, so far as I know. More than that I do not know, he tells us. So in effect, was he the last passenger to step into the last boat? And were there any other passengers or women and children around that he took the place of? Which is the accusation, isn't it? It's the accusation of the day and throughout history so far, that the CEO was a coward and took the place of women and children. That's the way to sell newspapers. And the accusation has really been on him ever since. So today we're going to be fair judges and analyze if there is evidence that tells us that that actually isn't the truth. So we keep an open mind. Let's carry on with the analysis. 3 things in his grammar give way in the same sentence, and they give way together. The verb turns over. Asked, asked, asked. And do you remember? And then it was unusual, wasn't it? Because it became told. So we have a change of language. And what we do is we look for a change of language in the statement, and we mark it and measure it. And we might be able to see surrounding where we have now seen the change in language, we might be able to see differences in language both surrounding the potential deception, and as the person goes back to memory recall, we might see a flood, almost like a tide returning linguistically. But again, let's stay out of the weeds. I can tell you all of that in a different video as we go into detail on the science, but let's stay for the qualitative analysis rather than the quantitative analysis at this part of the analysis, if I haven't said analysis too many times. So 4, the whole account, he has been the man who asks the people in charge, hasn't he? He's the one going into the corridors asking how bad the damage is. In this one sentence, he becomes the man who gives the order. The introduction collapses. He could set Bell in the companionway to the inch. This officer, the one we're talking about now, gets no name, no rank, no place. This is the officer that he gives the order told, the language told. He names Bell. He will name Wild. And like Toller and Carter, The one officer he cannot produce is the one he gave an order to. Isn't that interesting? Giving the order to get the boats out is not the act of a passenger. Do you remember, as we went through it, there was that he heard an officer give the order, and then he told someone to get the boats out, and that officer is nameless. So, but giving the order to get the boats out is not the act of a passenger, is it? It is authority over the running of the ship. The moment where he stops asking the men in charge and becomes the man in charge. And it is the moment that loses its verb, its introduction, and its name all at once. Set it against the foundation stone. I was simply a passenger, which was, if you listen to part 1, you'll see in more detail. It was absolutely out of my province. This is where that defense is most plainly broken by his conduct from his own words. Now remember, we have to play both barristers, defense and prosecution, which we will do, but we also have to be honest about what we see. Two innocent readings stay open. It may be chaos, the officer, a junior man perhaps, in the dark, whom he never fixed in memory, so the name was never there to lose, or it may be that this is the spot where his account strains hardest against what happened. Or it may be that having heard the officer give the order, he now sees another ship's officer and passes on the order and uses the language told, thus still being a passenger. Do you see? The reading picks neither. What is certain is narrow, and it is hard. 3 things in his grammar failed at once, and they failed on the single order he gave. 4 words, doing quiet work as best I could. No one has suggested he fell short. As best I could. Yet he concedes the limit before the charge arrives, and assisted shrinks him. The same hand that will later, asked directly, have put a great many in. The boundary falls here. More than that, I do not know. Here, people, passengers. He was helping put women and children into the last remaining boat. And circumstances meant, I believe, that others thought there was another boat as it was all filling up, and he was left alone. The last passenger with the last boat. Was he right to step on board? There were apparently 4 empty seats. He's asked, did the captain remain on the bridge? Sorry, did I just finish this? More than that, I do not know. On the boarding, from the man who minutes earlier could give the engine revolutions to the number. Oh, that's right. The knowledge that this is exact everywhere fails at exactly the place the world wanted it whole. Okay, well, that's the reading. Did the captain remain on the bridge? That I could not tell you, sir. Did you leave him on the bridge? Yes, sir. So a delicate pair, and the order of the 2 answers is the finding. He will not commit to whether the Smith stayed. I've noticed this in his language. He commits to what he knows. He is accurate. He will not commit to whether Smiths stayed, that I could not tell you, but he commits at once to having left him there. Yes, sir. He owns the leaving and disowns the knowledge of what came after, which is true. It fits everything else. Having turned away, he cannot say what the captain did once his back was to him. Even here, on the captain's last position, the firm word is kept for what he did, and the soft word for what he saw. He's questioned. His first statement to you was that he felt she was seriously damaged? Yes, sir. And the next statement of the chief engineer was what? To the same effect. To the same effect? Yes. But that he hoped the pumps might keep her afloat? Yes. Did you have any talk with the officer other than the captain or the chief engineer and the steward that you met? Not that I remember. Did the officers seem to know the serious character of this collision? That I could not tell, sir, because I had no conversation with them. Did any officer say to you that it evidently was not serious? No, sir. All the officers with whom you talked expressed the same fear, saying that it was serious? I did not speak to any of them, sir. Except the captain. Except the captain. And the chief engineer, I have already stated that I had spoken to them, but to no other officer that I remember. You went to the bridge immediately after you had returned to your room? After I had put on my coat, I went up to the bridge. And you found the captain there? The captain was there. In what part of the ship were your quarters? My quarters were on B deck, just after the main companionway. I wish you would describe just where that was. Well, do excuse me. The sun deck is the upper deck of all. Then we have what we call the A deck, which is the next deck, and then the B deck. A different question from the Senate. Different questioner, rather. Mr. Euler asks his questions. The second passenger deck. Ismay. We carry very few passengers on the A deck. I think we have a diagram here that will show you these decks. Here it is, and there is the room I was occupying, indicating on the diagram. What is the number of that room? B52 is the room I had. You had the suite? I had the suite. I was sleeping in that room, indicating on a diagram, as he says this, as a matter of fact. Do you know whether there were other passengers on that deck? I have no idea, sir. Part 4. The passenger and what he arranged. He explains his own presence unasked and corrects a denial into an admission. Question. You say that the trip was a voluntary trip on your part. Absolutely. For the purpose of viewing this ship in action, or did you have some business in New York? I had no business to bring me to New York at all. I simply came in the natural course of events, as one is apt to, in the case of a new ship, to see how she works, and with the idea of seeing how we could improve on her for the next ship, which we are building. So let's do the analysis. VEROSCOPE examination. He's asked why he was on board. He reaches for two phrases doing the same quiet work, simply and the natural course of events. No one has challenged his right to be there. He is answering a question that was never put, why the managing director of the line was on the maiden voyage and among the living. He makes it the ordinary thing, as one is apt to. When a man explains what he has not been asked to explain, he is pointing at the one spot he cannot leave alone. Question. Were there any other executive officers of the company aboard? None. Was the inspector or builder on board? There was no representative of the builders on board. Who was he? Mr. Thomas Andrews. In what capacity was he? I do not quite follow you. What was the occasion of his coming to make this trial trip? As a representative of the builders, to see that everything was working satisfactorily, and also to see how he could improve the next ship. Was he a man of large experience? Yes. Had he had a part in the construction of this ship himself? Yes. Was he among the survivors? Unfortunately, no. How old a man was he? Ismay says, it is difficult to judge a man's age, as you know, but I should think he was perhaps 42 or 43 years of age. He may have been less, I really could not say. Then you were the only executive officer aboard, representing your company, aside from the ship's customary complement of officers? Yes, sir. Did you have occasion to consult with the captain after the movement of the ship? Never. Did he consult you about it? Never. Perhaps I am wrong in saying that. I should like to say this. I do not know that it was quite a matter of consulting him about it, of his consulting me about it. But what we had arranged to do was that we would not attempt to arrive in New York at the lightship before 5 o'clock on Wednesday morning. Okay. So let's now go to the VEROSCOPE examination. It's starting to get interesting, isn't it? Never, he says, and again, never. And then he catches himself. Perhaps I am wrong. And then the correction is honest, an edit towards accuracy, which we always like to see when there is editing going on, editing towards accuracy. But look at what the corrected version lets slip. The passenger who never consulted, and was never consulted, had, in fact, arranged when the ship would arrive. Did you hear that? What we had arranged to do. This is the first crack in simply a passenger, and it is his own mouth that opens it. Question. That was the understanding? Yes, but that was arranged before we left Queenstown. Question. Was it supposed that you could reach New York at the time without putting the ship to its full running capacity? Oh, yes, sir. There was nothing to be gained by arriving at New York any earlier than that. You spoke of the revolutions on the early part of the voyage. Yes, sir. Those were increased as the distance was increased? Ismay. The Titanic being a new ship, we were gradually working her up. When you bring out a new ship, you naturally do not start her running at full speed until you get everything working smoothly and satisfactorily down below. Did I understand you to say that she exceeded 70 revolutions? Yes, sir. She was going 75 revolutions on Tuesday. On Tuesday? No, I am wrong. On Saturday. I mixed up as to the days. I am mixed up as to the days. So let's go to the VEROSCOPE examination. Two small things, both in his favour. First, you naturally do not start her running at full speed. His own decision smoothed it into what any careful operator does, with you standing in for himself. And second, the open self-correction. No, I am wrong. On Saturday, I am mixed up as to the days. A prepared story does not stumble and write itself in the open like that. The stumble is memory, not invention. So he's still working from memory. We haven't seen construction language so far. However, we are, of course, seeing where he's sensitive, no doubt from some of the accusations which have been circulating for the last 3 or 4 days. in the media. So we can see where he's sensitive, and we can see that he is knowledgeable to where he is vulnerable to that narrative, even though it may not be true. He may well have been on deck helping the women and the children into the last remaining boat, so much so that when everything was done and dusted, he was the last remaining passenger. And perhaps, and we're looking at the evidence, he unconsciously believes he was also a passenger and not a ship's officer. And being the last man, took a seat. What do you think? So, the ice and the wall. We knew ice lay ahead that night and met every question that touched it by disclaiming all standing. Question. During the voyage, do you know of your own knowledge of your proximity to icebergs? Ismay. Do I know that we were near icebergs? Yes. No, sir, I did not. I know ice had been reported. Ice had been reported? Yes. Did you personally see any icebergs or any large volume of ice? No, not until after the accident. Not until after the wreck? I had never seen an iceberg in my life before. You never saw one before? No, sir. Had you ever been on this so-called northern route before? We were on the southern route, sir. On this Newfoundland route? We were on the long southern route, not the northern route. Question. You were not on the extreme northern route? We were on the extreme southern route for the westbound ships. What was the longitude and latitude of this ship? Do you know? That I could not tell you. I am not a sailor. Were you cognizant of your proximity to icebergs at all on Saturday? On Saturday? No, sir. Question. Do you know anything about a wireless message from the America to the Titanic? No, sir. Saying that the America had encountered ice in that latitude? No, sir. Were you aware of the proximity of icebergs on Sunday? On Sunday? No, I did not know on Sunday. I knew that we would be in the ice region that night sometime. So let's go to the analysis. Hold the last line. I knew that we would be in the ice region that night sometime. So he knew. Not the navigation of it. Did you notice that? I'm not a sailor. Oh, that sounded good and camp, didn't it? Not the navigation of it, but the plain fact that ice lay on the path that night. He knew. And he keeps returning to the southern route, didn't he? There was this sensitivity in the language there. The cautious track. Prudence offered in his defence, true and worth offering. Set it beside what he has just admitted. So there was the dilly-dally, wasn't there, between the questioner and his answers. But he knew. That he knew ice lay on that track that night, and you are watching him build the case for his care around the very danger he himself has named. Question. That you would be or were, that we would be in the ice region on Sunday night. Question. Did you have any consultation with the captain regarding the matter? Absolutely none. Or with any other officer of the ship? With no officer at all, sir. It was absolutely out of my province. I am not a navigator. I was simply a passenger on board the ship. So here we have the wall, and it is built high. Out of my province, he tells us. Not a navigator. simply a passenger. 3 disclaimers in one breath, and absolutely doubled a habitual hedger, because he does hedge, turning absolute. This is the interesting part. He turns absolute at exactly the point where authority over the ship's course is the danger to him personally. So he doesn't hedge here. He builds a wall, and he builds it high. So we're going to look for reliable denials. Now set the wall against what he has already handed us. He knew ice lay ahead that night. He had arranged the ship's arrival. He intended her full speed run. The man with no province and no say is the same man who set the schedule and meant to open her up. And his own pronoun keeps what the disclaimer throws away. Through the voyage, he is we, isn't he? He dropped the personal I very early on in the statement. We ran her, he says. We were working her up. We built the Titanic until the blame draws near and the we gives way to I, simply a passenger. The we is dropped, and he returns to the I. He disclaims the power over the course in the same testimony, where he admits the power over the clock. That gap between simply a passenger and what he had arranged for arrival times and schedules is the clearest thing in the statement, and it is not a lie. It is the one live question his own words leave standing. Which decisions about the voyage were his to make? So, keep a very open mind. We're discovering evidence. If you're wearing the hat of the juror, perhaps you entered the trial believing his guilt from the media campaign, which you could not have helped but have seen. But how are you thinking now that you're going through the evidence yourself? Question. Do you know anything about the working of the wireless service on this ship? Ismay. In what way? We had wireless on the ship. Had you taken any unusual precaution to have a reserve of power for this wireless? Ismay. I believe there was, but I have no knowledge of that myself. Do you know how long the wireless continued to operate after the blow or collision? No, sir, I do not. Did you at any time see the operator of the wireless? I did not. Did you attempt to send any messages yourself? I did not. So, the lowering and the loading. The boats go down without a hand in the telling, and then one figure fills the deck. Let's see what happened in his own words. Question. Were you outside on the deck or on any deck when the order was given to lower the lifeboats? I heard Captain Smith give the order when I was on the bridge. You heard Captain Smith give the order? Sorry, you heard the captain give the order? Yes, sir. Would you tell us what he said? It is very difficult for me to remember exactly what was said, sir. As nearly as you can. I know I heard him give the order to lower the boats. I think that is all he said. I think he simply turned around and gave the order. Was there anything else said as to how they should be manned or occupied? No, sir, not that I heard. As soon as I heard him give the order to lower the boats, I left the bridge. So let's analyze what's been said. The verb left does double work here. The order to lower comes and he goes. He left the bridge and he left the captain on it. His whole account is stitched with these departures: the bridge, the captain, the ship, each one a left. I left the bridge. He's questioned. You left the bridge? Yes. Did you see any of the boats lowered? Yes, sir. How many? Certainly 3. Will you tell us, if you can, how they were lowered? They were swung out, people were put into the boats from the deck, and then they were simply lowered away down to the water. Were these lifeboats on the various decks? They were all on one deck. On what deck? On the sun deck, the deck above this, indicating on the diagram. I do not think it is shown on this plan. So, do excuse me. Question. That is the second deck above yours? On this deck here, on the big plan, indicating. On the sun deck? Yes, on what we call the sun deck or the boat deck. They were on the boat deck, which would be the upper deck of all. The upper deck of all, yes. Was there any order or supervision exercised by the officers of the ship in loading these lifeboats? Yes, sir. I wish you would tell just what that was. That I could not say. I could only speak from what I saw for myself. That is all I wish you to do. The boats that were lowered, where I was, were in charge of the officer and were filled and lowered away. The boats that were lowered, where I was, were in charge of the officer and were filled and lowered away. They first put men into the boats for the purpose of controlling them. We put in some of the ship's people. Some of the ship's people? Yes. How many? That I could not say. About how many? I could not say. About 3 or 4. The officer who was there will be able to give you that information, sir. My own statement would be simply guesswork. His statement would be reliable. Let's examine what's been said, the VEROSCOPE examination. So who is in the lowering? No one. The boats were swung out, the people were put into them, they were lowered away. Every verb is passive language. The actors lifted clean out so that a whole evacuation moves past without a single hand laid on it. Then asked, who put the men in? The first we put in some of the ship's people. We is the pronoun of shared work, and it tells you who a man feels, joined to as he speaks. We, and it is shared work. They are putting the people in. And he guards his evidence. I could only speak from what I saw for myself. Of the count in the boats, his work would be guesswork. Sorry, his word would be guesswork, and the officer's reliable. Did you notice that? He hands the floor to the man who is there and keeps for himself only what his eyes can hold. And he's fairly consistent. Well, fairly is wrong. He is consistent with this throughout the whole testimony. He commits only to what is his. What is for others, he doesn't claim. That is a witness drawing the line at the edge of his knowledge, not a builder reaching past it. So we are still in memory recall of truthful language, but we also notice that he has returned to the we in the shared work. He, to some degree, is not acting in his capacity as passenger. So, in the boat in which you left the ship, how many men were on board? 4. Besides yourself? I thought you meant the crew. So, let's have a look at this part. It's a small thing, it's easily passed, and it's one of the truest in the day. Asked how many men were in his boat, he says 4, and means the crew. He did not count himself. I thought you meant the crew, he says. In the arithmetic his mind did, before he could guard it, he was not one of the men in the boat. Make of it only what he made of it. Some part of him does not place himself among the people who took the seats. In the boat in which you left the ship, how many men were on board? 4. Well, I think we can say that perhaps there were 4. We would have to know the exact numbers if it was 4 crew, or perhaps there was another passenger who was a male as well. Either way, there's sensitivity here, isn't there? He's not counting himself. The questioner: I did mean the crew. There were 4 of the crew. What position did these men occupy? I do not know, sir. Were any of them officers? No. Or seamen? I believe one was a quartermaster. One was a quartermaster? I believe so, but I do not know. You saw 3 of the boats lowered yourself? Yes. And 3 of them loaded? Yes. And they were loaded. Was any order given as to how they should be loaded? No. How did it happen that the women were first put aboard these lifeboats? The natural order would be women and children first. Was that the order? Oh, yes. That was followed as far as practicable. I doubt he stuttered. So far as you observed, so far as I observed. And were all the women and children accommodated in these lifeboats? I could not tell you, sir. So look at the word natural and at the tense. Doing the examination, the VEROSCOPE examination now. Look at the word natural and at the tense. Asked what happened, he tells you what would happen. The natural order would be women and children first. That is the rule, not the act. The thing that ought to occur, offered in place of the thing he saw, and pressed on whether it was actually done, the certainty thins to as far as practicable, to so far as I observed, and then to I could not tell you. He commits to the rule and he hedges the outcome. We have to bear in mind the chaos on the ship at certain points in time. I believe a revolver was fired. The move from what was done to what is normally done is a small step back from the deck. Question: how many passengers were in the lifeboat in which you left the ship? Ismay: I should think about 45. 45? That is my recollection. was at its full capacity, practically. How about the other two boats? The other three, I should think, were fairly loaded up. The three besides the one you were in? Yes. They were fairly well filled? Yes. Was there any struggle or jostling? I saw none. Or any attempt by men to get into the boats? I saw none. Were these women passengers designated as they went into the lifeboat? No, sir. Those that were nearest the lifeboat were taken in. We simply picked the women out and put them in the boat as fast as we could. You picked them from among the throng? We took the first ones that were there and put them in the lifeboats. I was there myself and put a lot in. You helped put some of them in yourself? I put a great many in. Now, VEROSCOPE analysis. Now the pronoun travels, and the journey is the whole of it. We picked the women out. We picked the women out. We put them in as fast as we could. Then, as the credit becomes worth having, the shared we gives way. I was there myself. The myself leaning on it, and at last I put a great many in. From the team to the man, from a lot to a great many, each step nearer himself and larger. Set it against his own summary from earlier, where all of this had shrunk to I assisted as best I could. Sketching the night as a whole, what governs him is the saving he could not do, and he makes himself small. Pressed on the particular, the working hand comes back. Both are true, and the distance between them is a man bowed by the rescue he failed, recovering under questioning the rescue he managed. He becomes stronger in his truth. He was putting a great deal of passengers, women and children, into the boats himself. But he uses the pronoun we. He acts as if he is part of the responsible crew. Question. Were children shown the same consideration as the women? Absolutely. Did you see any lifeboat without its complement of oarsmen? I did not. Did you see the first lifeboat lowered? That I could not answer, sir. I saw the first lifeboat lowered on the starboard side. What was going on the port side I had no knowledge of. So, listen to what he is handed to deny. He is asked whether men try to force their way into the boats, and he, the man the world will accuse of taking a place, answers that he saw no man try to take one. Twice. The denial lands on the exact charge laid down at his own door, and it is I saw none, not there was none. He denies the sight of it, not the thing, keeping to what his eyes can answer for, the same way he keeps to the starboard side and will not speak for the port. To deny the sight and not the thing is the opposite of invention. He is consistent and truthful. Question. It has been intimated, Mr. Ismay, that the first lifeboat did not contain the necessary number of men to man it. As to that, I have no knowledge, sir, and that women were obliged to row the boat. Mr. Hughes and Senator Smith. the second lifeboat, and that women were obliged to row that boat from 10:30 o'clock at night until 7:30 the next morning. The accident did not take place until 11. Well, from after 11:30 o'clock at night until between 6 and 7 o'clock the next morning. Of that I have no knowledge. Until the Carpathia overtook them. You have no knowledge of that? Absolutely none, sir. So far as your observation went, would you say that was not so? I would not say either yes or no, but I did not see it. Question. When you first went onto the deck, were you only partially clothed? That is all, sir. And as I understand, you went as far to encounter an officer or steward? An officer or steward? Yes, sir. And then returned? That is right. The last hour and the departure. The act buried last is a sentence built entirely of what was not there. Question. How long were you on the ship after the collision occurred? Ismay. That is a very difficult question to answer, sir. Practically until the time, almost until she sank. How long did it take to lower and load a lifeboat? I could not answer that. Can you approximate it? It is not possible for me to judge the time. I could not answer that. Were you on the Titanic an hour after the collision? Oh, yes. How much longer? I should think it was an hour and a quarter. An hour and a quarter? I should think that was it, perhaps longer. Did you, during this time, see any of the passengers that you knew? I really do not remember. I saw a great many passengers, but I do not think I paid very much attention to who they were. I do not remember recognizing any of them. Did you know Charles M. Hayes? Yes, sir. Did you know of the presence of other Americans and Canadians of prominence? No, sir. I knew Mr. Hayes was on board the ship. You knew he was on board the ship? Yes, I have known him for some years. But you did not see him after the accident occurred? I never saw him after the accident, no. And he is unaccounted for? Yes, sir. He was not among the saved? No, sir. What were the circumstances, Mr. Ismay, of your departure from the ship? In what way? Did the last boat that you went on leave the ship from some point near where you were? I was immediately opposite the lifeboat when she left. Immediately opposite? Yes. What were the circumstances of your departure from the ship? I ask merely that. The boat was there. There was a certain number of men in the boat, and the officer called out asking if there were any more women, and there was no response. And there were no passengers left on the deck. There were no passengers on the deck? No, sir. And as the boat was in the act of being lowered away, I got into it. At the time the Titanic was sinking? She was sinking. So, the VEROSCOPE examination. This is the question the inquiry was called into being to ask. I need to stop talking in his voice. I do apologise. Otherwise, you won't know who's who. Is it me or is it Ismay? Okay, so this is the question the inquiry was called into being to ask. And the first thing out of him is a question back. In what way, he said. A query met with a query buys a moment, doesn't it? That cognitive thinking time. And it tends to surface at the one question he would rather not meet head on. Of everything put to him that morning, this is the one he answers by asking what is meant. Pressed, he answers a softer question first, where he stood not what he did, immediately opposite. Then the wall. And every brick of it is a thing that was not there. The boat was there, come upon not sought, Men were already in it. The officer called for women, and none came. No passengers on the deck. 3 absences laid end to end before he places himself anywhere near the act. And the order of his last sentence tells the rest. First, the boat is already going down. In the act of being lowered away, it's going. And then, last, in 4 bare words, this is the admission: I got into it. That's it. I got into it. He has the boat leave before he steps into it. And that's actually how you should get into a lifeboat. You step down into the life raft. Otherwise, your yacht, if that's what you're on, is a lot more safe than a rubber old thing. I can promise you that. And most of the time, after the storm, they're still afloat. So always step down into the lifeboat is the advice. And that is indeed what he does. So the stepping reads less as taking a seat than as catching hold of something already in motion. A long, careful preamble of absence, and the act itself folded small at the very end. Look how small he folds it. I got into it. Is that fair? He's been on deck, he's been putting people into the boats, and eventually the crowd disperses. Perhaps they go to portside to look for a boat over there. And he's the last remaining passenger, and we know that passenger is sensitive to him. If he's crew, inside his mind, perhaps he should not abandon the ship. Although if it is the last lifeboat, and there is a spot, what do you think? What do you think? He's not the captain, and no other passengers are left. What is the right thing to do? Obviously, the captain should be the last man. Isn't that the law of the sea? But he is a passenger, and there is a seat, and the lifeboat is going down. Question: where did this ship collide? Was it a side blow? I have no knowledge myself. I can only state what I have been told, that she hit the iceberg somewhere between the breakwater and the bridge. VEROSCOPE examination. See where he sets the edge of his sight. Asked where the ship struck, he does not answer as a man who watched it. I have no knowledge myself. I can only state what I have been told. Then the place, and later, on the glancing blow, from information I have received, he marks the second hand as second hand. He does it the whole day. What he was told kept as told. What he heard kept as hearsay. Never once dressed up as something he saw. The witness is reliable. This is the quiet engine running under the examination, as assembled account blurs that line, because invented knowledge has no source to name, and the building has to pass for memory. Ismay keeps it sharp. It is the same move as handing the boat count to the officer, because the officer's word would be reliable, and as saying, I saw none, rather than there was none. He guards the edge of what he knows, which is precisely what a truthful witness does, and a builder cannot afford to do. Question: state that again. Between the breakwater and the bridge, on the starboard side? Yes. Here we have one of the survivors. Those who know her name, do put in the comments. The reliable denials. We shall continue with the reliable denials in part 3, which will also include part of the science of the VEROSCOPE framework, which is available on the Open Science framework, and I'll put the OSF link in the video description. Okay, enjoy the rest of the day. Do remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and if you thought you have some value out of today's video, do remember to like the video and let others access it through the algorithm. Okay, look forward to chat with you in the comments.